I am to speak about half an hour with you about this book, The Garden of Truth, and then give you a chance to ask some questions. But let me begin by saying a word about Maulana himself, about Rumi. I have the honor of him being his friend since I was 4 or 5 years old. And the first verses at the beginning of the Masnavi are memorized at that age. And that's a long time ago, and I've lived with him and his message all these decades. And I've always felt privileged to be able to say a few words about him. And I think last year, which was the year of Rumi, I did my part, participating in different places, and especially I gave the keynote speech in Istanbul, and also Konya, and the inauguration and the major event dealing with Maulana's life and thought and works. And I've written a few things about him over the years. And I'm very happy to, once in a while, participate in some of the programs of the Rumi Forum. The very fact that I've chosen the name of this incredible person for the organization is very telling at a time when the message of Rumi is both extremely needed and extremely unheeded, both at the same time. The present book, The Garden of Truth, grows out of the 70 years, really, of acquaintance with Sufi literature. But much more important than that, with Sufism itself. Sufism is not its literature. As I've always said, the literatures of Sufism, no matter how great, are like sparks given off by fire. But there's certain fires that don't go off in sparks. And Sufism itself cannot be judged solely by the remarkable literary expressions that it has produced over the centuries in many, many languages, in Arabic and Persian, later on in Turkish, Urdu, Swahili, Bengali, Gujarati, Kalandan, any language of the Islamic people that you can name, Albanian. There are always elements dealing with Sufism therein, and usually the greatest works of those languages are works by Sufis. It's very interesting, except for Arabic, which of course the supreme text is the Quran itself. In every other Islamic language, the most universal and profound writings are by Sufis, who created Turkish as an Islamic language. Now you have to ask yourself, like you say, Yazidi, the great master of Sufism into Central Asia, brought the Turkic people into Islam. And the greatest poet of the Turkish language, who was it? Yunus Emre. And he was, of course, a supreme Sufi poet. And you could say the same thing for Bengali as an Islamic language, for Gujarati, Sindhi. The whole language of Sindhi is probably exhausted by the beauty of the Risalo, written actually on the model of the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi by Shah Latif of Sindh, the great saint of Sindh. And in Persian language, which is my own language, my mother tongue, which has produced incredibly large number of very great poets, who transformed really the cultural life of Asia. It's through the writings of Hafiz and Rumi and Sadi that the whole spirit of Islam throughout the Indian subcontinent and all the way to Western China is to be found. Even in the Persian language, which is so rich with incredible poets, the greatest poetry is the poetry which is Sufi poetry. But despite all of this, this is not really Sufism itself. It's a sparks given off by the fire of Sufism. Sufism itself is being burned in the fire of divine love in God. And all I need to do is to repeat a verse of Rumi, which almost every Turk whose mother tongue is not Persian knows. حاصل عمرم سه سخن بیش نیست آن بودم گفته شدم سوختم. That is, the whole product of my life is but 3 words. I was unripe, I ripened, and I burned. Sukhman, that is, I was immolated. That's Rumi's whole message. Just out of one verse that I quoted for you. And that's what really Sufism is. Now, during my life, I've written a lot of things on Sufism, books, articles, anything. But I decided at this late stage of my life, I commissioned by one of the leading publishers in the United States to write a book which is not a book about Sufism, but it's a Sufi book. This book, in contrast to my book, is Sufi essays or all the other works I've written on Maulana and others, is not about Sufism, it's Sufism itself. And perhaps the first book of its kind in the English language, except for the pseudo-Sufis who appeared in the 70s and 80s and were trying to present Sufism outside of the context of Islam. I was talking about general ideas without really being rooted in the Islamic tradition. But serious Sufism is perhaps the first work of its kind, and it's not based on history. In fact, it's the reverse. It begins with the most important existential question that you have to ask ourselves, and that is, who are we and what are we doing here? The whole of human life, either consciously or unconsciously, is determined by the answer we give to ourselves to these questions. Whether we are theist, atheist, agnostic, good people, bad people, whatever we do, it depends on this fundamental question that we ask ourselves. And the type of answer we give is related to who we are ourselves. Our person, please come in. Assalamu alaikum. Is determined by the question we ask ourselves. And therefore, the book really begins with this basic question and seeks to answer this question of who we are and what we are doing in this world. Why are we here? What should be the goal of our life? And from there, it builds up, having tried to answer this question, how to realize who we really are in this life, how to live according to who we really are. That is, we are really archetypes in the knowledge of God. Ultimately, we are in God, we are in divinus before we descend into this world. And the Sufis always speak about our descent from what we were in principle before the creation of the world. Maulana has over 100 references in the Masnavi to the famous verse of the Quran, which is foundational to Sufism, when God asks the progeny of Adam, after having created Adam in Surah Al-Baqarah, أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى, am I not your Lord? And it's in the plural, بِرَبِّكُمْ. That is, the verse does not address Adam, but all of the progeny of Adam, all of us. And we said, yes, yea, bala,